Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by the National Science Teachers Association. You can find out more at nsta.org. While you're there, take a look at NSTA's National Conference this spring from April 11th to the 14th in St. Louis. We hope to see you there. You're listening to the Lab Out Loud podcast, Science for the Classroom and beyond. And today we're talking about how we can engage students with STEM curriculum through the use of popular fiction.
So you have kids who are really excited about the book, and they're readers anyway. They're approaching it from that way. They've read the book, they're really pumped to go. And then you have kids who would not have read the book if it weren't for the game. So the game becomes the hook, so it really becomes an entry point for reading. But at the same time, it becomes an entry point for all those great STEM concepts that you can tie into them.
That's up next on Lab Out Loud, but first, I'm your co-host Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.
And today's a real treat because, like I said in the intro, we're talking about popular fiction, and today's two guests not only connect students with popular fiction through live games, but they're also podcasters.
Hi, I'm Gillian King-Cargile. I'm the director of STEM Read at Northern Illinois University, and I'm also the co-host of the STEM Read podcast.
And I am Kristin Brynteson. I'm the director of professional development for NIU STEAM, and I am also the co-host of the STEM Read podcast.
Now, it was ultimately Brian. You're the one who found out about STEM Read at a conference last summer?
I was at the ISTE conference this summer in Chicago, and one of the things that I attended, well, actually, I kind of did an Andy Weir stalking day, and that was my day. I was just going to start with Andy Weir and end with Andy Weir, except I didn't end the evening with Andy Weir because I didn't do the after hours celebration.
Because of the restraining order by that time?
No.
You were on the list.
Yeah. Yep.
No, I didn't do that part. I know you had a little shindig where you're at, and I didn't get a chance to attend that. But I did everything else during the day. But of course, you were both there for most everything else.
Yeah.
And of course, then we got to introduce to what STEM Reads is. Can you first of all tell us what is STEM Reads?
So it's STEM Read singular.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. So STEM Read is an outreach program that explores the science, technology, engineering, and math behind popular fiction books. And we do that in a variety of different ways. We do some things like the Andy Weir events that you went to that are like, that was a professional development party in space. We do breakout games based on books. We also do these large-scale events for students where we pick a book and we'll have a day-long game based on the book. And the different parts of the game will follow. There'll be hands-on STEM challenges that follow the plot points in the book. And at the end of the event, the students get to meet the author. And then in addition to that, we do online resources, free online resources, including lesson plans related to the book and different writing activities that people can do, videos and games. Did I leave anything out?
Nope, I think that covers most of it.
Yeah, there's the game portion of it that really drew me in when I was at the conference, and that was actually one of the sessions where you had a game based on the book Artemis.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Do you design those games? And that's got to be a background of yours then.
It's not really. So
it is now.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it is a background of ours now.
We're fully trained.
Okay. Fully trained gameologists.
Yes,
exactly.
No, my background is actually in writing and filmmaking, and I consider myself a professional science appreciator and now also a professional game maker, apparently.
Yes, and my background is industrial engineering. So I started my career as a continuous improvement engineer before I went into instructional tech and design. So it's kind of this blending of our experiences and backgrounds. And we both just like to play games. And we thought, what a great way to teach and learn and celebrate great books.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's actually like a board game college out there, like maybe a degree.
There's got to, well, yeah, I mean, we've talked to a couple game designers before on the show, and there is some science to it and a little bit of art to make a good game that's people want to keep playing and things like that.
Yeah.
So what have you learned from that process?
Well, I know for me, I pulled on some of the expertise that came out of University of Wisconsin in Madison.
Woohoo!
Yay!
We're in Wisconsin. Excellent.
So it's looking at what can we learn from games that keep students engaged. And I come from a family of gamers. My husband was a gamer. Both of my two young adult children have been gamers all their lives, and I've always been a gaming appreciator. And so I've seen how these games can suck kids in. And I don't know, Gillian, if you've had similar experiences.
I played a lot of video games, especially in grad school when I should have been writing more. But
this was pre-Candy Crush too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There you go.
I like Nintendo, Mario Kart. I'm always saying, what's our blue shell for this game? What's the great equalizer?
I love it.
But what we do when we find a book, we'll find a book that we like. At first, it starts with a fun, cool book that is going to get people excited.
Do you have an example?
Quarantine is one that I like to use as an example. So Quarantine is a book about a biological weapon is accidentally introduced in a high school. That happens. And so all of
sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
It's not loathing.
Yeah. What do we do with that thing? Oh, left it in the high school. And so all of the teachers hemorrhage and die within about the first 30 pages.
Just the teachers?
Yeah. Yeah. So the students.
Was a staff development day.
Yes.
Really bad PD.
Yeah.
Hey, they died of apathy.
Some of them make you feel like you want to hemorrhage and die. No, the students become poisonous to the teachers. So anyone who is in puberty can retain this biological weapon within them, and they are then they can kill anybody else in the area.
As a father of teens, I believe this spreads at home too.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a game. This is not reality right now.
You've met my children, right?
Yeah, ripped from the headlines. The book is by Lex Thomas, by the way. And so the students, they're quarantined in their high school and they get food drops, but it becomes pretty clear pretty quick that they're not getting any help from the outside and they're left to fend for themselves. And so they break down into tribes based on their social cliques, and hijinks ensue, I'd say.
I'd say hijinks is a... Yeah. Hijinks galore.
Yeah. So we think of it as Lord of the Flies meets the Breakfast Club.
I know. I kind of want to read this book now.
Oh, it's so good.
Great book.
So now, do you find that the book draws them into the game, or does the game draw them back into the reading? Is there?
I think both. So you have kids who are really excited about the book and they're readers anyway. And so they're approaching it from that way. They've read the book. They're really pumped to go. And then you have kids who would not have read the book if it weren't for the game. So the game becomes the hook that they'll go back and be like, I don't understand why we had to make costumes for that challenge. What did that have to do with the book? Or in the one we just did, The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, which was a retelling of Frankenstein. And they're like, I don't understand why I had to stitch a banana and pretend like it was my brother's arm. Like, what's going on in this game? So then they'll go back to the book. So it really becomes an entry point for reading. But at the same time, it becomes an entry point for all those great STEM concepts that you can tie into them. But we don't necessarily look for STEM books. We look for good, exciting books first. Mm-hmm. And then we draw them out of it.
I was about to say, do you choose books based on where you think the game could go, or does that usually come from the book anyway?
Some of them, we go back and forth on that because some of them were like, this is such a great book and how could we turn it into a game? There's we ask students to give us, ideas of books that they want. And the one that comes up a lot that we're just stumped on is To Kill a Mockingbird. And we're like, I don't know. Yeah.
So what's interesting is like I'm doing a project with a teacher right now where the students have to design an object to be printed, like a 3D printed object. And so we call it a book token, and it has to be an inanimate object that serves as like a main character in the book. So, I mean, you could think of like the wishing tree in Shel Silverstein as the tree, or like a wand in Harry Potter. But now I'm thinking like you have to choose 4 objects and make them into characters for a board game.
Ooh.
Oh.
That'd be awesome.
That would be very cool.
Oh.
Like the moving game pieces, right?
Well, exactly. And then they can, well, part of it is, of course, they have to write about it because they have to give the backstory to why that object is important. So they have to, dig around the edges a little bit there. But now if you have 4 characters or 4 pieces in there, that's adding to it.
Well, it's kind of like it's adding that. It's making the game makes the book kind of become a little more tactile, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and that's one of the things that we say is we say, learn the STEM, live the book, that you really get into the concepts.
Well, and we found that we did a game for the book Ashfall by Mike Mullen. And in that game, it's the premise of the book is the super volcano has exploded under Yellowstone, and you have a kid in Iowa who's trying to get back to his family in Illinois. And as part of the game, the teams are trying to keep teams of meeples alive. And so you've got this kind of survival book where people aren't necessarily surviving. And because they're losing meeples and gaining meeples, and they've got these little plastic people that they're trying to keep alive, it really helps them understand what the characters of the book are going through. And they become very attached to those meeples.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like a cereal.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying meatballs for a second.
That'd be delicious.
That'd be a whole different level of gameplay.
It'd get smelly after a while.
Don't eat your meeple. Actually, there's cannibals in that game, so you could eat your meeples.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
So you go to a lot of schools and you do some of these things with the students there, or do they come to you?
Most of the time they come to us at Northern Illinois University. So we kind of put out the call that we've got a game. We do this in usually in November and April are our big, unveilings of our new games.
All right.
And so
kind of reminds me of like Escape Room almost.
It is, but it's bigger. So they're large scale team based games. So usually we've had anywhere from 200 to 1,000 kids playing at the same time.
Oh, wow.
So they play in teams of 6 to 8, and the challenges are, take different STEM concepts. They're very cooperative challenges. They're usually building towards something. So one of the things, you asked, like, is my background as a game designer? Well, my background is in writing, so I kind of create a parallel story that the gamers are going through, and that mirrors the concepts from the book. So we kind of connect all of the elements of the game very tightly to the elements of the book, and we can even pull out passages that will launch us into different parts of the game.
And so they all get the assignment to read that book like in advance, right?
So some people read it in advance, which is the way we recommend, and some people use it as a big bang to start it out.
Okay, sure.
But some of them get a little bit spoilery.
Yeah, we try our best to not spoil it, but because they're living the plot of the book and doing challenges that the characters in the book experience, it's hard not to spoil it.
So you'd be at an advantage if you read the book.
You are definitely at an advantage.
Which is a good thing. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But what's interesting is we have had some schools then go back and reread the book after playing the game, because it kind of puts it in a different perspective.
Sure. Have you learned things that like don't work through all of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that usually we play test things. I think the things that really we learned is how long things take. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's. Can you think of anyone that's really like crashed in our faces?
No, I think our biggest lesson was scale. We started off doing these at about 200 kids or so. And then we brought in some authors that were really popular, and our numbers grew to about 1,000. And planning for 1,000 was
just
really
moving
difficult.
those people around.
Right, because you're not sure logistically if you're going to have time. And so it changed the way we planned some of our challenges. And we just found that the experience is better. I mean, we made it work with 1,000, and I think it was enjoyable, and the students learned things. But it really, a smaller group, there was a better experience. And I think we made the challenges more challenging because we knew we could manage it on that scale better than on a larger scale.
All right.
So I think that was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah. I guess the time that we really goofed up a challenge, it was when we had 1,000 kids and we just didn't figure out. It was an engineering challenge. It was related to the I Survived books, and we had Lauren Tarshish on campus, and they were creating something that would keep their secret lab dry when the levees broke because of Hurricane Katrina. And so basically we didn't have enough testing stations. And so we had a big scrum of people at the testing stations, and some people, everybody failed, which we wanted them to all fail the first time, but not everybody got to test. And the kids were really frustrated, and we're like, oh no, what are we going to do? And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, wait, we can spin this. And so I got back up there and I said, was that frustrating for you? Did you feel like you didn't have enough time or resources? That's what it's like in a hurricane. But we're going to give you a chance to review.
See, that's like lesson planning, though. You gotta salvage what you can. You learn.
Yeah,
from
I believe
things
Silicon Valley calls that a pivot.
Yeah, we do a lot of that. I think that's been the best thing about the team that we have working on these is, you can have everything planned to the letter, but the day of, if you've really got to have the flexibility to go with the flow, read the room, change your timings. And I think when Gillian and I are up there, there's a lot of sidebar meetings going, okay, did this work? Do we need to take 5 minutes off here? Do we still need to give them more time?
Yeah.
So you say read the room, but I'm hearing 1,000 people. Where are they all, like, in physical space? Are they spread out across your campus, or?
So when we had 1,000 people there, they were in our basketball arena. So we had long tables set up. They were in groups of 4. Usually we do it in a ballroom. With quarantine, we got to use an empty junior high, and we quarantined them in there.
Oh,
that was really
that's
cool.
cool.
Yeah. So if there's a spot to do it that makes more sense or will just be more awesome, then we'll do it like that. We kind of have let the event,
How do the students feel about all this? Do they know what they're getting into?
Some of them do and some of them don't. Like some kids there are schools who have come for the past few years. So some of them will come, like there's a group that comes in 7th and 8th grade. So this fall we had the kids who won t-shirts last year. They came wearing the t-shirts that they won. So they were like, we got this. We got to know what to pay attention to. And they're like, that might be a clue. That might be a clue. And so they were trying to figure out what the game was going to be and how they could use things to their advantage. And other kids come in like, they have no idea what's going on. And in The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, we've got like heads in jars on the stage. We've got a corpse up there wrapped in a bloody sheet. And
he's now in our storeroom and terrifies us every time we walk in. But
right.
So you have fun with this, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
we do.
And we dress up in costumes. We have lighting and sound effects. So we did another one, Kate Hannigan's The Detective's Assistant, and we brought in an Abraham Lincoln impersonator. And that like blew the kids' minds. They were like, Abraham Lincoln is here?
Why,
This
yes.
is crazy. I thought we were learning about STEM. And we're like, you're learning about everything.
Everything. And all the students got little mustaches. So all of the students were wearing their fake mustaches, which was hilarious.
You have to find one now that involves like slime or like putty, because those are the big things now. So, and then you can make it. Yeah, that would be one of the things you could do.
Is the author present for this?
Yes. Whenever possible. Mary Shelley could not make it.
She's hard to get this time of year.
But yeah, we try to have the authors there, and the authors have a blast.
I was wondering
too.
what their feedback was.
And they don't always know, like some people are kind of in on it and they've seen what we've done, and other people just come in and they think they're going to do a reading and they're like, what is happening right now?
My manager didn't tell me about this.
Right. I'm
Not in my contract.
Yeah. And I say to them, like, you can, depending on your comfort level, you can watch from the balcony or you can be down in it. Like some of the authors, Mike Mullen always puts on a Grim Reaper costume when we play the Ashball game, and he'll reap the meeples. Like he'll go and take the meeples that have been killed. He'll take them out of play.
I thought they could pass out like cheat
M.T.
codes
Anderson.
because they're the author,
That's what, well, some people get upset that the kids are, losing.
Yeah.
Some people are like,
sure.
Can I give them a hint? And we're like, no, go backstage.
Everyone's supposed to win with reading.
That's right.
Yeah, we're all winners because of the experience we
That's
just
right.
lived.
That's right.
Now, you also have this podcast from STEM Read. And is this the same kind of deal then, where you talk with the author about the book then? Or
Yes.
what's that all about then?
So I really like the idea of authors and scientists. We've been, and people from other STEM disciplines. Like it was always exciting to have people read the books that we were working with, and then talk to us about what their research was, what their real STEM things that they were doing related to the book. Thank you.
Yeah, the connections.
That's why there's two of us.
Yeah.
And so the podcast grew out of that. We'd just be having interesting conversations with people, and we hope that they're interesting to others. So first we pick a hot topic in STEM or education, and we talk to an expert. And then we find a fiction book that will kind of exemplify that topic. And then we talk to the author about how they came to write it, and what their thoughts are on education and how the book could be used in the classroom.
And you usually get the author for this part. Do you do them any time without the author? Like obviously the Mary Shelley part.
Yeah, only those dead ones. They're so hard to get. We usually, for the podcast, we always have the author. So we'll look at the author and then sometimes we hold on to a podcast for a long time if we haven't gotten the author yet. Sure. With Andy Weir, I knew we could get him, and I was like, we had been talking to an educational psychologist, and we got on the topic of The Martian, and I was like, I'm going to hold on to this because I believe that Andy Weir will be on our podcast and we'll get to do events with him. And Kristin was like, okay, sure. Yeah. And
that sounds familiar to Brian and I's experience. We have little wish lists.
He sounds like a white whale, I would call it.
Yeah.
And going along with the book theme there.
See what you did there.
Donica McKellar is one of our white whales.
Oh, yeah.
If you're listening, Donica, you know how to find us, but...
Yeah, she's had all those math
We
books
think
out.
you should do it, Donica. It would be great.
Yeah.
And we could forward her your information too, and then we could do a double piece there.
How long have you been doing the podcast?
We've been doing it for about a year, and so we're still. I think I consider it like we're building things up. We're trying to. We're a fairly small team, so when we're really in the guts of a game, the podcast is irregularly posted. But we've got a bunch that are about to come out now that we finished Frankenstein.
Yeah. And sometimes we interview an author and we might have to hold it till we find the perfect expert, whether it's an educator or scientist or so it's finding that pairing in a way that makes sense.
Do you have any idea what this author pairs with?
We're expert author pairers.
That's really a neat idea, though. I love that.
You can envision like some kind of matchmaking service out there, author and scientist, and yeah.
Well, it's funny. Like there's a scientist that I really want to get on the podcast.
We call it Binder.
Yeah,
Yes,
I like it.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So
It came to me a little slowly, but Dale got it finally.
when we work with Argonne National Lab quite a bit, and while we were there with Andy Weir, I got to meet the head of supercomputing there, and her name is Catherine Reilly, and she was she was very interesting. And she was talking about how her job is to blow up stars, but she can't do that in her lab. So she uses the supercomputer to simulate it. And so I'm like, oh yeah, you need to be on the podcast. And we're like, what book can we pair with her blowing up stars, supercomputers? So we're looking.
Gotcha. So you have a couple just waiting to be matched up, and
we have a lot. Yeah. We have there. If we could do only the podcast all day, every day, I think it could be a daily podcast.
But we have a very long list of people we'd like to talk to. Whether they want to talk with us is another thing, but we would like to talk with them.
Were you surprised the contacts that when you did, reach out and have that first one, like, sure, I'll do the podcast?
Well, we started with people we already knew.
Oh, okay.
So we did have a leg up because we'd been doing the field trips. And so we went with some of our friends, our low-hanging fruit, I guess, that are wonderful. They're not, I don't want to diminish the...
We knew that they'd be great to talk to.
And we knew that if we screwed up and it never came out, that they would forgive us.
Yes.
I guess, Brian, that's kind of how we started too. We did start with people we knew would happen. But one of the things we always talk about that we learned is there's no harm in asking. Because we were always so surprised sometimes when you get a call back or an email back and we're like, oh, and so that we'd never not ask.
Although that's gotten a little bit harder for two reasons. And number one is I think there's a lot more students. That's an encouraged thing within education now, is to reach out to contact an expert. And some of them are still doing that, but I think the market's become a little more saturated there. And then journalists are harder to get a hold of right now. They don't always publish. They don't always publish their contact information. I have no idea why. Maybe there's something in the political realm. I don't know. But I've been noticing that, trying to get a hold of a couple people. I'm like, I just don't know how to get a hold of them.
So, yeah. Well, I think that just asking is really important, though. I mean, that was something I learned when I was in film school. I was like, I want to have a cop car in this scene and I want to do this and that. And, my professors were like, how are you going to do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I'll call the police station.
Just ask.
We'll see what we can do. And I got a cop car in the movie. And so it was like, if you, the worst they can say is no, right? And then you think of a different idea. But if you don't ask at all, then
exactly. The no is exactly where you are if you say nothing.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, we've actually found even people that would surprise us said yes, but people that we were like, I want to say, not that you're no one, but sometimes I'm like, really? They said no, so it's a balance. But there's also a lot of scientists out there that education outreach is part of their grants. And so this was a perfect opportunity for them to share that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of academics who really want to talk about their work and they don't have the outlet to talk about the impact of their work. They're doing amazing things. We had the opportunity to talk with, she's a pioneer in the area of air quality. And it was just to hear her history and everything she's been going through since the 70s when she was in this field. It was fascinating just to have those conversations with some of these scientists.
We're like, she's a really big deal.
She's really cool.
She's the reason we don't all have cancer right now.
Yeah, well,
and you use the word off-gassing a lot.
What you're going to find is cool is in a few years, you're going to keep doing this and you'll have this huge volume and some of those names will come back to you and you'll be like, wow, we interviewed that person, way back when and we thought they were a big deal and now they are. Or they're even a bigger deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We've had some conversations that have gone places we'd never expect them to. And I think that's what's great about the podcast is to be able to, you go in with your set questions and you say, oh, we're going to talk for 15, 20 minutes. And it's like an hour later, you've just had this super rich, amazing conversation with these really insightful people.
I'm getting this sense of deja vu.
Exactly.
I don't know about you,
sure.
but
it sounds very familiar. Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
Exactly. And some of the conversations that we have are the surprising ones are the ones that are the most rewarding too.
Mm-hmm. There are so many times where I have been like, who are we? Because Brian is pretty much our booker, and there are times where I'm like, who are we meeting with? And all of a sudden it just comes. I love that feeling when it just comes out of left field and you had no idea.
We had a conversation with Brian Mallow, who's a science comedian, and that was one of our most rewarding conversations. Just the art of designing his sketches were kind of like the way that we do lesson planning, and it was a wonderful conversation.
The comedians, I think, have a lot in common with teachers. They have to deal with hecklers.
Yep.
They if they're good, they're reflective about their craft and their presentation, and they rewrite and do all those kinds of things. It's fascinating, actually.
They feed off the crowd.
True.
Well, that's one of the things we talk a lot about when we're talking with, whether it's a scientist, an educator, an author, is all of these kind of overlapping processes. A lot of what we do, no matter what field we're in, are similar. It's a similar process, a similar set of skills, and we're more connected than we really think we are.
So is that why you got into this? What tripped you into doing the podcast and starting STEM Read?
Well, I think it really is like thinking about those connections, and thinking about how interrelated all the disciplines are, because the origin of STEM Read was I came into the university as a marketing writer and a speech writer and a grant writer, and we happened to have a really strong STEM outreach program, but nobody was doing anything with books. And I was like, can I do something with books? And they're like, yeah, sure. And this
open niche ticket.
Yeah, basically. So I think that to show people those connections, because you have so many times it seems like, that scientist that you're looking at only ever wanted to be a scientist and only ever thought of science, but that's not really true. They were reading books too. They were thinking their thoughts, and this is how it came out. This is the end point of all the things that they've been evolving through. And so looking at that, I think, is really interesting, those origin stories.
Yeah, and I think part of it, too, is because we all have, in our department, have very interesting origin stories. We have these meandering, kind of strange paths. People ask, how do we get to do what you do? And we're like, well, let me think. Because we all have come from such diverse backgrounds, but we're now sharing this really fun experience.
Yeah.
And there's a perseverance piece in that too, that, Dale and I, we just kind of stumbled into this, and we're still doing it after almost 200 episodes now. And you go through these times where they're tough, and you feel like, do we want to do this again? But then you hit this roll, and you're like, oh yeah, that's why we do it. Or we get feedback from a teacher saying they use this in class. And then you're like, yeah, that's why we're here.
Yeah, that sounds familiar on our side too. You get those pieces of feedback, or somebody said that one experience did this for me or my students, and you're like, that's why. That's it right there.
Yeah. Well, we did the Maze Runner in 2014, I think. And we had a teacher last year that was like, I want to work with you because my son went to the Maze Runner, and he's about to graduate, and that was the best experience. He said that was the best experience he had in all of his time in school.
Oh, wow.
And we were like, oh, all right.
Got one.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, I don't know what I'm speaking of. I think it was a terrible transition. No, you said something earlier that made me think, wait a minute, the listeners, what about the listeners, our listeners, that is, as educators? And I was thinking about your website, coming back as some of the resources that you have for educators, some that are coming up, some that are there all the time. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we try to make sure that we create standards-aligned lessons for all of the books that we do. What you'll find on the website are some of the challenges that you would see in the day of events, but then also a lot of wraparound activities, things that could be done either as you're reading the book or as you're finishing the book. So even if you don't have the opportunity to come to campus and experience a live event, there's a lot of different ways you can use these books across any classroom. So we've got a really good team here who kind of starts with we start with the book, and then we go to the standards, and then we start kind of creating the lessons that tie them together. So it's a lot of fun to develop some of the lessons and resources. There's also some videos on some of the sites or connected with some of the books that you can use as you're reading the books with the kids and with the students. Some of the expert interviews that kind of connect to the different content. But all of the resources on our website are free and openly licensed. So we actually encourage people to, you might find a lesson that we designed for Ashfall, but your students are reading a different volcano book or some other survival book. So we would love to see how people are using them, revisiting them, and just changing them up. We encourage that, and we'd love to hear back from people on that.
Yeah. We also try to include project-based learning and problem-based learning. So we'll do a PBL for each book, and that will relate what was in the book back to real world problems that the students can identify themselves in their school or in their community. So it's not just read the book and you do these things that would never happen in the real world. Right. You apply it back to your life. So even though it's fiction, you get that sense that I can act on this, I can learn from it, and I can change my world because of what I've learned.
And it's not just science-based or STEM-based. We've got, I think for the Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, we have an art installation based on body systems. There are some mental health and ethics type activities and lesson plans. So there's some good SEL, social emotional learning content. We look at math, ELA, the next gen science standards. But again, it's connecting them all in an activity that touches on a variety of different content and activities.
And you have a summer institute coming up, I see also.
We do. So one of the things that we have found is we had been getting a lot of requests to come out and do these at schools. And as Gillian had mentioned, we're a relatively small team. So capacity was an issue. So that's where we've decided that we can train teachers to implement some of these things in their classrooms. So last year was our first summer institute, and we're doing it again this summer in the end of July.
I was
going to say, I'm looking at her for dates. I think it's
I just clicked off. I was looking at it. 24th to the 26th.
24th to 26th. Yes.
And so our summer institute helps you become a STEM read educator. So you come to campus, we run you through we put you in the role of the students, and you play all the games that we released this past school year. And those usually take up a morning. And then we spend our afternoons talking about the STEM read philosophy, how we choose our books, how we design the activities, and how would you implement this in your classroom, your school, your district. So it's kind of get to know the activities and talk about implementation and brainstorm other ideas and other books that you might already be using in your classroom that you could use as a stepping off point for a STEM read-like experience.
Sure. Very cool.
Gillian, do you want to say who our special guest is this year?
Yeah, we have
spoiler.
Yeah, Lex Thomas is coming. So we always pull one from the vault, and the vault field trip that we're doing is quarantine. So we've got Lex Thomas coming. So we're excited about that.
And you have on the video pages for people who are trying to visualize this, you have video highlights of things going on at these.
Yeah. Sometimes, especially if I'm talking to a publicist, they're like,
what?
You're a principal. They're like, you do what? You're going to lock my kids in a building and they're going to do what? Are they really going to kill each other? And I'm like, maybe.
And the parents are like, you're taking the kids for how long? Okay, bye.
Yeah. Basically. Like, do I have to stay? Okay. But yeah, so yeah, we have video overviews of all of our recent field trips. So you can check out what they look like and see the reaction of the kids, which is really fun because you wouldn't think, at 9 a.m, kids are doing a math challenge. You wouldn't think that they're like sprinting across a room to get their answers in, but they do. And, it gets very intense and very competitive.
Well, that's, you've got some amazing resources there. I was amazed by what you had this summer when I saw you at ISTE, and knew we had to have you on the show and talk about what you have available for education, as well as just talk a little bit about what you've learned in doing the process and in doing the podcast too. So Kristin and Gillian, thank you so much for your time, and we wish you well and good reading ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'd like to learn more about today's episode, head on over to our website, laboutloud.com, for more information. You can also find details about all the previous episodes, and you can leave us feedback and comments. We want to hear from you.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed on iTunes, Google Play Music, or your favorite podcasting platform. And if you really enjoyed it, consider leaving us a rating or a review. Your feedback helps others find our show.
If you like Lab Out Loud and you love the show that we provide for you, please consider supporting the show at our Patreon page. Head on over to patreon.com/laboutloud for more information. Until next time, I'm Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.
Well, and did you say who our spring books were?
Oh, I didn't. The spring books are The Wild Robot by Peter Brown, and also Aaron Starmer. So we're going to do a few of his books. We're going to do The Only Ones, and we're working with Argonne on that one. Mm-hmm. And then he has a few other books, but we're also going to look at Spontaneous, which is about these teenagers that explode.
Go on.
So
I'm sensing a theme here.
Yeah, there's a lot of
poisonous teenagers, exploding teenagers.
That's yeah. There's another exploding teenager book too that people are really.
I didn't think it was a genre.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Where's your exploding teenager section?
Yeah.
Past the tarps.
Yes.
It's next to the surviving mega volcanoes.
Yeah, there you go.